This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovators Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are here in the mobile studio here at the Consumer Electronics Show, covering the latest and greatest of new gadgets, technologies, flying cars even. I was over looking at the Belle new flying car. Didn't place my order yet. Still considering. But you can pretty much see almost anything and everything you could even imagine here. Getting to hang out with 180,000 of your nearest and dearest friends and geeks. So today we have a special guest. So Pelle, you and I have known each other here for a little bit. You're one of the Fiterator companies. So remind the listeners, Fiterator is I wouldn't call it an accelerator. We call it basically an accelerator graduate degree program that we run at Cable Labs. It's really around finding companies that have product, services, customers, and funding. So it's not a startup situation, but looking to help them with product market fit to partner with the industry that we're involved in. Yeah. So you guys have been part of Fiterator.
Absolutely.
So before we get into the company, back up and give us a little bit of history on yourself.
I'm one of those who's been through the most random things you can imagine, and somehow I ended up here, right? From when I was 5, making meatballs on a crate in my dad's restaurant, to running their networking and bowling alley that they had in the back from the 1950s. So I had to figure out how to make all those solenoids and everything work, and oil the lanes and figure that whole thing out, to figuring out how to do their SEO and management of their identity online, right? And going through that whole process, I ended up doing streaming for online video. So before Twitch, we were doing esports casting, like ESPN style, and then doing it for sports, like the World Series of Fighting and conferences. And somehow that led to me creating and working, doing Mutable, which is basically trying to create a new world for developers to take advantage of the closest possible place you can put servers for developers, the edge of the network.
Yeah, so I don't know if you and I ever talked about our collective bowling experiences. No. So my mom was a pro bowler.
Yeah, okay.
And junior high school, and college, I worked at a 52-lane bowling alley my mom managed. So if you need a Brunswick pin setter rebuilt, I am your dude. It's one of the reasons why I have such bad hearing loss, and I have to wear hearing aids. It's from all those years behind the machines. But so back up, and what was that aha moment when you said, I can fix that problem, that eventually led to Mutable? So even prior to Mutable, where did you see the problem that kind of generated that light bulb moment for you?
So when you're a person that constantly thinks of ideas, right? And you're like, well, you're looking at any situation, no matter where you are, and always trying to figure out how to make it better, optimize. Because if you're in that person's shoes, which a lot of cases you are, you want to make that person's life or yourself's life easier. But the amount of work that it takes to go from an idea to building something to making it something that's usable for people is a decently long process. And a lot of it gets stuck with expensive developers building things that they don't necessarily know how to get to the end result they're looking for. Mm-hmm. And so if you can shortcut that by creating developer tools to make it as easy as possible, you can build and create an incredible amount of ideas. And not every idea is the best idea. But if you can make it so you can fail fast and figure it out without spending all this money and effort to something that you might not even know is a good idea or not, then that's where I figured out, like, that's what I needed to do. I need to figure out a way to solve the problem of getting products out fast as possible and then making it scalable right afterwards, not just stopping at the prototyping phase, because that's when you rebuild everything over and over again. And it just so happens that a lot of the companies that I was helping out with needed help building their platform. And instead of me making a custom version for each one of them, I just gave them the system that I was creating for some other client, and I managed all the servers and databases and everything and how it worked. And they were able to create companies like wireless charging for cars and a search engine for stock photography and all these crazy things off of one base of code. And it was like, okay, how can I scale this up?
Yeah, but Mutable's in a unique position, though. You've actually gone off and trying to you're trying to apply kind of enterprise scale for a development tool set to allow others to deliver great experiences to their customers. But it's not just, okay, you're not trying to create a new version of AWS or Microsoft Azure. You're doing it with somewhat of a little bit different twist.
Sure. Yeah. So we are trying to create the next evolution of what AWS or Azure should be, right? Which is you have, when one company owns all the assets, meaning physical land and the servers and the people to manage them, you're limited on the amount of CapEx they can put out there, right? You can't be everywhere all the time. There's not enough manpower or capital that one company, even the size of Google or Amazon, can have in order to have these micro presence everywhere. And so who does have that? Individually, it is communication companies, because that's where they serve their users. All those physical lines have to go somewhere. And that space, as it's converting from hardware to virtualization, is freeing up. So by creating a disaggregated version of what AWS is doing, by looping in all the connectivity industry into one AWS, you create this next evolution of, instead of it just being in these big hyperscale locations that's managed by one company, you now have, like, just Cable Labs has 63 members in it, right? And there's so many more everywhere else that you now have this awesome footprint that you can provide low latency compute to.
Well, low latency compute is kind of the critical piece. So, the fact that, we announced earlier this week the 10G platform for delivering 1 gigabit to more than 100 million homes in the U.S. going to 10 gigabit. Great. Speed. Speed's no longer going to be the metric.
No.
Latency, and if you're any kind of active in the gaming world, latency is the thing you measure. And most every game now gives you your latency speed.
Oh, for sure.
And latency is dictated by distance. So having big mega data centers on the coast, and you're in the heartland of America, you can't violate laws of physics on the speed of light. Distance is always your enemy. So in your case, you're talking about, how do I take basically these massive data centers and literally blow them up and then highly distribute? But that's a hugely complex process of managing all these little distributed assets scattered into locations. Literally, they could be stuck in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and Fargo, and Erie, Wisconsin, and and you've got all these assets just blown out all over the place. So how do you do that? Well, we've only got a couple of minutes. I'm going to give you a little bit of time here, then we'll pick it up in the next segment. But give us just a little bit of a high level on, what you're doing to make that a reality.
It's automation, right? It's plain taking something that would normally be done manually and automating it to the nth degree. And that's the only way, using software to make this. Not a hardware solution or something that you need configs and all this kind of stuff. Literally every part, from the networking to the server management to the actual deployment, is all automated.
And so in this case, on the automation piece, what you're doing, though, is you're also creating a platform so that the application developers don't have to think about it being a highly distributed.
Yeah.
Right. In many cases, the application kind of we talk about, virtual environments, but virtual environments still have rough edges where you have to tailor it to that virtual environment.
Sure.
In your case, you're trying to create a platform that has, global scale and that ability to allow for the developers to write once, play anywhere, and to be able to take full advantage of it. And I think that is a pretty unique twist, because I'm a big believer that we do have to deal with getting to this whole issue of low latency.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be what determines and differentiates the experience that the consumers are going to see, whether it's whether they think of it as being quick and immersive,
Sure.
gaming, VR, AR, whatever has a high time constraint. So let's pick up this conversation because I want to get a little bit more about what Mutable's doing and how you're creating these markets. So don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back after this quick commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Welcome back to Killer Innovations, our conversation with Pelle. Pelle, talk more now about Mutable, because you guys have not only solved the whole complexity issue of, basically going upstream counter to what everybody thinks about as cloud services, which is get everything aggregated, but also making that available to third parties to be able to take advantage of this new capability. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So usually inside of these type of places where you have who's going to put the hardware out into all these locations to create edge compute, it's one of the bigger questions of who's going to pay for it, right? And that's where we are able to figure out, talking with all these cable companies, 26 of them, having over 160 meetings, we realized that they're in this process of moving from hardware to software, right? For a lot of their internal solutions. So in that process, they're going to be running virtualized compute themselves. So instead of just solving for the third-party developer and getting them access to this kind of real estate, there needed to be a driver for helping the MSOs get to that point, right? And in that process, there is already servers that are going to be going out to these locations to run these applications for them. And so we're being part of that process. And taking the extra available compute, because they always build for peak capacity and redundancy, and taking the extra sliver that's not being used, which sounds like a sliver, but in reality it's like 80% or more of the capacity that 99% of the time isn't being used, and allowing third-party developers to take advantage of that. And that seeds the market and gets us to a place where we can always prioritize the internal applications for the cable and telco companies, but then on the times that they aren't being used, we can allow other ones to take advantage. And most other companies don't need the 1, 5, 10 millisecond mark. They need closer to 20, 30, whatever. But in this case, we can actually bring it down to a level where literally no one, because it's at the access layer, which is incredible.
Right. And it's interesting because what you're talking about is particularly about the sharing of capacity, that being able to be dynamic. A lot of people don't realize that that's how Amazon came about, because Amazon built up this huge server infrastructure to deal with holiday season. And then they used to run around in February 1 and power down all their data centers. And then August kind of time frame, they'd go power it all up, apply all the updates, get everything back up and running, and then get any new software patches put installed so they can be ready for Thanksgiving and then get back into the season. So for, just to save on the electric bill, they literally ran around and powered everything down.
Sure.
And they're like, that doesn't make any sense. I got all this capacity. And now it turns out that the profit engine from AWS is more than the profit from the Amazon sales.
Yeah.
It's a completely different model. In the case of Mutable, though, what I think is interesting is you're creating this market where developers who want to take advantage of this edge compute platform, rather than having to go cut a deal with every ISP out there, whether it be a cable operator or a telco or even a wireless provider, they would have to go cut a deal with every one of them. You're playing that market maker role, right?
Yes, that was actually a huge part of this, because think of the individuality of a lot of these ISPs. A lot of them are quite small, right? There's some that are really big, right? But there's a lot of them that are small. And you as a customer, let's say Spotify, they don't know where their customer is getting their internet from, and they don't care.
And they shouldn't.
Right? And they shouldn't. And so, and if you were to do services where one of these cable companies, let's just say, would provide the service, they wouldn't actually produce enough value just because of the fact that they're only limiting to their subscriber base, right? So because of us doing the work on providing this unified approach across all of these providers, you actually create a marketplace that makes sense for this to work.
Right.
Otherwise, so that way the smaller guys can get money because their customers are using Spotify, and then the bigger guys make money because they're using Spotify. And so it's like you're now taking advantage of however many customers you have is relatively how much money you're going to make based off of your amount of customers that are using it, which makes total economic sense.
Right, and in your case, you're creating a two-sided market, right? Because you've got the server infrastructure as part of the ISV network or ISP network. You've got the third-party app developers who want to take advantage of it, and then the revenue actually gets into a revenue share model.
Mm-hmm.
So the ISPs are actually getting compensated for the network portion, the server portion,
Mm-hmm.
etc., and you get compensated for the market making kind of a role.
And the orchestration.
Well, yeah,
But,
because a lot of people don't and look, listeners of the show know that I was, I retired as the CTO for HP, and HP in the last 18 months has gone big into edge compute. In fact, they've set up a entire product division just for their edge compute platform. And I'm a big believer in it and have been for quite some time, but managing one data center to managing 100,000 little bitty elements scattered out all over the globe where you can't go put your finger on that box at a moment's notice, it's a whole different complexity problem. And that I think people underestimate how big or how hard that orchestration management piece is, and it's got to work, because otherwise people will lose that confidence to trust that that's a platform that they can use to deliver real experiences to the customers. So we got just a quick minute here before we have to go to break again, but give us quickly kind of some anecdotals of what the experience has been for those that have been using the platform.
So as I mentioned, we have a customer that does wireless charging for cars.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things where in a lot of cases, it would be incredibly difficult for them to even attempt what they're doing if they didn't have this. Because when you think of wireless charging for cars, you're thinking about, you go over a pad and you charge the vehicle. But think of all the mechanics of monitoring what's happening in real time, because this is a safety issue, right?
That's right.
These things catch on fire, they do whatever. And so with cars, you could say that's one of those things where you have some safety measures too. But in a lot of these cases, you need this to be running operational all the time.
Right, it's 24/7. You can't
send a tech out there and do that. You need proactive maintenance, just like you do it in cable and telco and the connectivity industry. Any physical thing that you put out in the field needs to constantly be monitored, so that way you don't have all this extra stuff there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
keep costs down.
Yeah, well, keep costs down, and consumers' willingness to deal with any form of an outage is getting less and less.
Yeah.
People just expect it to work the first time out, work reliably, and be zero hassle. And that puts the burden back on the innovators to make sure that when you are building these kinds of solutions, you're baking that in day one. You're not putting something out there and then coming behind and trying to patch it. We're going to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversations about Mutable. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Welcome back to Killer Innovations. Continuing our conversations with Pelle, talking about Mutable. Let's talk a little bit about the history of Mutable, right?
Sure. We
got in the first segment where you shared with us kind of your history and experiences. And actually, it's one of the things I laugh about, right? Because we talked a little bit about the fact that we both have a weird kind of overlapping experience in the bowling world. In the bowling world,
and from our parents, no less. Right?
Yeah, and but I think people coming from the variety of experiences, right? It's not just kind of a linear path in anybody's career, but the same can be said for companies also, right? What people start out planning to do to versus what actually the marketplace wants are completely different. But let's back up and talk about Mutable. How long has Mutable been around now?
It's been around for About 4 years.
4 years. Yeah. And at the start, was it self-funded, friends and family, VC?
It was self-funded, and a lot of it was actually customer revenue and some consulting on the customers that were using the products. That we were really close on trying to make sure we were making a fit on what they needed, and working and using the product is the best way to figure that out.
Right. And how much money have you raised so far now?
Actually, only a couple $100K.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So it's all been revenue generated, revenue funded
Yeah.
then at this point? That's actually...
And we went through Techstars too, but
you went
other
through
than that.
Yeah, the Techstars. And then, now with Upramp Federator. Because there's always this big argument about taking VC dollars, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, I don't know if you saw, there was a big article today about, warning, don't take VC dollars. There's kind of an anti-VC backlash because of, loss of control and being able to be in control of your own destiny, that type of thing.
I think it's totally fine to take VC money, it's just doing it at the right time, right?
Right.
Because if you do it too early and you're doing it before there's something that has exactly what they want, which is the billion-dollar company or whatever else, then you're putting yourself in position of trying to get funding again just to survive, right?
Right.
Versus if you have a good plan and you actually going through iterations, you actually can learn and figure out, hey, look, as much as the other stuff was great, this is something that can be a lot bigger and latch on. And what we're doing with edge computing and working with the cable and telco industry is definitely that.
Yeah, and so talk a little bit about, so you've been 4 years into the process, right? And there's always this, you have your plan on day one, and then now you have the reality 4 years later. If you could go back and give yourself one or two pieces of advice, something you wish you knew was going to happen or not happen or whatever, that could have been helpful back on day one, what would be that? What would be that advice?
Great question, because a lot of things is actually persistence, right? And knowing when to scale up. So in this particular case, we didn't actually grow to a team of 10 until this year. We were 2 for actually over 3 years. And that was a good predicator that kept us lean and making sure that we were following the right path. Because if we were to scale up too early and focus on the wrong things, then we actually would have to die, right? Because and as much as we were doing something that was really great at the time, which was helping developers build, prototype, and then scale out with containers and microservices on the cloud, as we make that transition to this world of edge computing, it brings a new dynamic of creating these moats, right? Defensibility, sure, you can do it with technology, and sure, you can do it with people, but having it with a marketplace and having it with having this real big tie of, hey, look, being part of the Cable Labs family allows us to get access and actually figure out what they need, and changes the game quite a bit.
Yeah, I think the one point I wanted to, kind of hop on was the ability to show self-constraint, right? Everybody feels like success comes from getting big fast, right? And being disciplined and not overextending, because I can tell you when with a lot of organizations where they think growth equals success or number of staff equals success, you can get yourself into a burn rate where all of a sudden the strategy gets thrown out the window and you're doing anything and everything just to bring cash in the door, and it changes the whole dynamics of the organization. So what's the current status with Mutable? Where are you at today? What's it look like here in the near to midterm?
So we're in the process of doing a round, and at the same time we're actually starting a lot of pilots coming up with a bunch of cable companies, which is fantastic. Because it's one thing to talk with everyone, right? It's another thing for them to buy in, right? And it's another to actually get deployed. And actually these guys want us to come in and help them out on internal stuff, and really are interested on getting over to that revenue generation process.
Yeah. And that's interesting because, when you and I first met, the marketplace and the revenue share piece was kind of the lead point. But I think one of the lessons learned that came up with you going out and flying out all over the place, we are in 35 countries, so that it's a unique challenge, is the ability to use your solution to solve an internal problem, which is the more immediate pain point. The revenue is the gravy. The immediate is solve my problem today.
And it's funny because in our eyes, the marketplace, and I think even in yours, like that is what we want to get to, right?
Right.
Like, that should be today, right? But reality of putting servers out there and having ROI and having this huge customer base to support it, it's really internally, they have so many problems that this is like a godsend just to have this private cloud to help them internally.
Well, it also helps with their argument with the CFO
to
get
ROI.
funding.
Yeah, for sure.
And so what's next for Mutable?
It is straight up getting access, and our main KPI that we're working against is coverage, right? And so just like you would with a cell phone plan or whatever it is, when you're doing edge computing, you have all these micro locations. Coverage is the name of the game, and so by working with all these telco and cable companies and getting access to these locations, slowly we're going to grow our coverage to be something to be forced to be reckoned with. Yeah.
Well, and coverage is a challenge, but coverage, you do have the ability though to pace your rollout.
Yep.
So that if latency is a critical metric, you improve it as you fill in your coverage with the other players. So if people want to keep up with what Mutable's up to, where's the best place they can track it?
On Twitter, just go to Mutable.
So it's just Mutable.
Just Mutable.
And then your website?
It's mutable.io.
What's that?
Mutable.io.
Mutable.io. We'll have all that in the show notes, and you can find that all over at killerinnovations.com. Pelle, thanks a lot for taking the time. I really appreciate you coming out here to join us here in the mobile studio at Consumer Electronics Show, and hope you have a great rest of the show. For listeners, don't go anywhere. We have segment 4 coming up. That is the 5 minutes to new ideas, where we'll pose a new, interesting, and sometimes crazy and funny question to cause you to look at your opportunities in a unique and different way. So you're not going to want to go anywhere. You're going to want to stay with us right after this break. Also, we are coming up on season 15 for Killer Innovations. Yes, we started in 2005. I have to remind people that we started podcasting before iTunes even existed, which is kind of hard to imagine given everything that's going on. Also, I want to extend a real personal invitation for the listeners to join us over in the Innovators community. It's where I hang out every day. It's where there's a rapidly growing community of innovators from Fortune 50 innovation leaders within large multinationals down all the way through into founders or individual entrepreneurs. It's a free community. You can find it over at theinnovators.community. Check that out. Join in the conversation. A lot of great conversation on innovation tools, books, trainings, what people are trying in other organizations that you might be able to beg, borrow, steal, and use within your organization. So, and that community is rapidly growing. So hop on over, join us. And if you've got questions about this episode or any other episode of Killer Innovations, I'm there, like I said, every day. You can direct message me directly from within the community. We can chat, and more than willing to answer questions and provide whatever help and guidance we have. So with that, stay right where you're at. We'll be right back after this quick break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Back in the early days of this show, I would share what I called a killer question in each episode. These questions were designed to be used in your personal, team, or organization's innovation efforts. Now, based on feedback from listeners just like you, we've decided to bring it back with some improvements. Each episode of the Killer Innovations has a segment that I'm now calling 5 Minutes to New Ideas. It's designed for the creative mind looking for that next great idea. Each episode will challenge you to think differently about yourself, your business, and your products and services by asking unique, funny, and sometimes crazy questions. These questions are designed to force you to look beyond the obvious and to uncover ideas and opportunities you never before considered. So, get out your notebook and be ready to uncover that game-changing idea. Here is 5 minutes to new ideas. Great leaders in business, government, or society know that when it comes to others, there's always more than meets the eye. Earl Nightingale once shared a story that reminds us to look beyond what we think is obvious. It seems that the NBC Orchestra was about to be formed, and David Sarnoff, chairman of the board of NBC, gave one directive: do not hire away any players from existing orchestras. The people in charge managed to put together a superb orchestra, all except for the first clarinetist. When the great maestro Toscanini was about to arrive from Italy to take over the orchestra, Sarnoff was asked how the problem should be handled. Should Toscanini be left to find out about the first clarinetist himself, or should they be upfront with him and tell him? Sarnoff said, "Let's tell him." His associate said, "You tell him." Accordingly, a group went down to meet the boat as it arrived in New York City. In his stateroom, Toscanini greeted Sarnoff and said, "That's a fine orchestra you've got there. Very fine. All except for the first clarinetist." Sarnoff was taken aback and asked, "Maestro, how did you find out?" Toscanini then said, "I have been listening on a little shortwave radio I had in Milan, and I could tell." Yes, he could hear the first clarinetist on a little radio in Milan. Toscanini then said, "Take me to the studios." There the orchestra was rehearsing, and a special dressing room was waiting for him. He sent for the clarinetist, who arrived convinced that he was about to be fired. Toscanini said to him, "You are a good clarinet player, but there are certain things that you do wrong." Then he began to work with him. The upshot was that clarinetist stayed with the orchestra for 17 years and became one of the world's best. As is human nature, we tend to judge people based on who they are today. We fail to take the time and see them as they could be. With the right encouragement, patience, mentoring, and a lot of training, you could play a role in helping them become the person you are looking for. I grew up in Chicago, and during the summers, I would take Illinois Central train to attend weekend seminars at the University of Chicago. During one of those seminars, the instructor quoted a story about Dr. Robert Hutchins, who was the chancellor at the University of Chicago back in the 40s and 50s. It seems a group was having a discussion about adult education and training, and someone made the comment that you cannot teach old dog new tricks, to which Dr. Hutchins responded, "Human beings are not dogs, and education and training is not a bag of tricks." When it comes to creativity and innovation, there are some who believe that all that is required is to search, find, and then learn the bag of tricks of creativity to be successful. Or worse, that everyone should already know the tricks and should be able to walk through the door and perform. This is far too much to expect of a person. A recent Adobe study points out that only 25% of the workforce feel they are skilled and are applying creativity and innovation as part of their job. We need to move beyond the idea that there is a bag of tricks and instead educate our people so that they can gain confidence in their ability to be creative, to be innovative. Why don't you take on the role of teaching others how to be more creative, more innovative? When you are a student, you learn something, but you don't completely get it until you try to teach it to others. When you try to teach something to someone else, you have to take that mess of information and organize it in a way that someone else can understand. And in the process, you expand your own understanding and as a result become better at creativity and innovation yourself. As the lyric from the Phil Collins song, "Son of Man" goes, "In learning, you will teach, and in teaching, you will learn." In each of us is a deep reservoir of ability, even genius, that we consistently fail to take advantage of. It takes knowledge, practice, and time to bring that ability to the surface. Investing in your team's creative abilities will have a return that far exceeds any other investment you can make. As Dr. Edward de Bono says, there is no doubt that creativity is the most important human resource of all. Without creativity, there would be no progress, and we will be forever repeating the same patterns. So my question to you is, who is that clarinetist in your orchestra that has the hidden ability to be world class? I'm Phil McKinney, and thanks for listening. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join in. If you have any comments or suggestions, drop me a note at phil@killerinnovations.com. Now, the reason I started this show back in 2005 was to pay back my early mentor. My first mentor, Bob Davis, invested an immense amount of time in training and coaching me, which had a major impact on my career. When I went back and asked him how I could pay him back, he laughed and said I couldn't. I had to pay it forward. If I could ask for a favor, could you help me pay it forward? How? 1, by giving us a rating wherever you get your podcast, as that helps spread the word. And 2, by telling others about the show. If you want to be part of the conversation between the shows, I hang out in the Innovators community on Slack. The Innovators community is a private community of vetted innovators who help each other succeed. Check it out at theinnovators.community. This episode of Killer Innovations was produced by the Innovators Network. You can find the show notes and the entire show catalog going back to 2005 at killerinnovations.com. I'll talk to you next week, and in the meantime, go out and change the world with your killer innovation. Bye-bye.